aligned activities.
Thank you. Senator Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Pompeo, for your service. Secretary Pompeo, we have quite the record of President Trump's business relations with Russia. Extensive reporting and public records show a large amount of money from former Soviets to Russia into Trump projects. Trump International Tower and Hotel in Toronto, the Trump Hotel in Panama, the Trump Project in Soho in New York City are a few of the big examples here. Here's another one. A Russian oligarch bought a property from President Trump for 95 million, candidate Trump at the time, or maybe a little 5 million in 2008. Less than 4 years after President Trump paid 41 million. So he more than doubled this money. Donald Trump Jr. in 2008 stated at a real estate conference in New York, and I quote here, "Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets," end quote. Donald Trump tried to build a Trump Moscow for 30 years. He even tweeted in 2013, "Trump Tower Moscow is next," that's in quotes. In 2015, answering a question from indicted Russian operative and alleged spy Maria Butina, candidate Trump made clear his desires with Russia, stating, "I would get along well with Putin and that I don't think we need the sanctions." Now the Russian ambassador to the United States has said the president made, and this is his quote, "important verbal agreements with President Putin." And he seems to know more about Helsinki and what happened there than the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. As we saw in Helsinki and throughout his presidency and the campaign, this president is extremely sympathetic to the very Russian government that attacked and continues to attack our democracy and those of our allies. It's a fact of political life today that many Americans are concerned about the unthinkable, that a U.S. president could have a compromising relationship with a foreign power. President could pull up in 3 simple ways: releasing his tax returns and those of the Trump Organization, and the taxes from the various family businesses, some of which we don't even know about. After Helsinki, do you think that the American people deserve to know what's in President Trump's tax returns and business interests that are intertwined with Russia?
Then I'm going to try to stay out of the same political circus that you and I ended up in while I was sitting here, and simply respond by saying, this same president with which you seem to express such deep concern is engaged in a massive defense buildup, which threatens Vladimir Putin's regime. He instructed us to put together a nuclear posture review that has set Vladimir Putin on his ear because of its robustness and the recapitalization of our nuclear program. He's kicked out 60 spies. We've banned Kaspersky.
Yeah, I put $11 billion in the campaign. Is that Secretary? You've already.
No, Senator, actually, I haven't even begun describing.
No, but you haven't answered my question, so let me try it a little different way. Wouldn't you want to know, as Secretary of State, I mean, I'm taking you in your sincerity here as Secretary of State, whether all these Russian financial interest oligarchs and are part of the decision-making of the president. I mean, wouldn't you want that out in the open and understand what went on in Helsinki? It's an easy kind of yes or no question.
No, I don't need secondhand understandings of what President Trump is instructing his administration to do to push back against Russia. I have firsthand understanding.
Well,
and directed.
Let me ask the question a little bit different.
Opposed to Nord Stream 2. We've got a 4x30 out of NATO that also is a big setback for Russia. I mean, I'm happy to continue the list. I'm happy to see there, but I will submit the entirety of this administration's actions against Russia for the record, if I might.
Please
do. Back a truck up and get it on air.
Yeah, candidate Trump has failed to keep his promise to disclose his tax returns. Every presidential candidate since Richard Nixon has disclosed. Jimmy Carter even sold his peanut farm to avoid a conflict of interest. The situation with President Trump's potential foreign policy conflicts of interest is unprecedented and unacceptable. And under the Emoluments Clause, I think it's unconstitutional as well. But let me just ask a couple of questions about Helsinki. You talked about what you were tasked with. The Director of National Intelligence Code stated that at the Aspen Security Forum that he did not know what happened during the one-on-one meeting in Helsinki. Did the President personally debrief you on this conversation? Are you 100% confident that you know everything that President Trump discussed with President Putin? That's a very easy yes or no. If you don't want to answer it, I'll move on to the next one. So yes or no?
I'm very confident that I received a comprehensive debriefing from President Trump.
Good, okay. Now, do you know for a fact whether President Trump or President Putin discussed any investments in Trump properties or any Trump projects, such as the previous attempt to build a Trump real estate project in Moscow?
Senator, again, I'm going to try to stay out of the political circus.
No, but were
What is
you,
the question?
sir,
Yes,
were you tasked with that? You gave us a list of what you
I'm
were tasked
here to talk about American foreign policy today. I've attempted to articulate President Trump.
All of these
direction.
business interests are entwined, sir, with our foreign policy.
Yes, a foreign policy that has led to a massive defense buildup, a nuclear posture review that has frightened Vladimir Putin, 60 spies, 219, 213 sanctions.
Let me also ask you about an additional question on Helsinki.
When I was a member of Congress, I tried desperately to get President to be one of those things.
When
Unsuccessful.
President Trump hosted top Russian officials at the White House last year, he bragged about how he had fired James Comey. At his press conference with Putin, President Trump called Special Counselor Mueller's investigation a disaster for the country. Can you tell us what President Trump discussed about the investigation during his private meeting with President Putin?
I'm not going to talk about private.
Were you tasked with anything in that respect?
Senator, when I'm tasked about something for American foreign policy, I promise you this committee will not.
Okay, and you weren't tasked with anything there.
Senator, when I'm tasked with something by the president relates to foreign policy, I assure you that this committee will be made aware of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your service to the country and your time with us today. When you were last here, I asked you a question about whether or not you agreed with Secretary Mattis that North Korea is the most urgent security threat the United States faces. In light of recent developments, do you still agree with that? At the time, you said that you did.
Yeah, it's still a real priority.
We also talked about do you believe it's the most urgent national security threat?
I do. But having said that, I don't recall the precise timing when I was here.
I think it was in April, perhaps.
Yeah, so it is. The fact that we're having conversations and we haven't had additional missile tests and nuclear testing, maybe it's still a priority. I don't know how to think about it, but I'm optimistic that we're headed in a path that is the right direction, and we just got to get the rate of change.
The testimony, you used the term final, fully verified denuclearization. In previous testimony, you've used the word permanent, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. U.S. law says complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. UN resolutions call for complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Are these the same terms? Do they mean the same thing?
Precisely the same thing.
Exactly. Full, complete, total denuclearization according to U.S. law and UN security resolution.
Yes.
Why the different words?
Sometimes one needs to just break away. It's difficult. I'm happy to use the term verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. They mean the same thing.
Okay. The CVID declaration or determination, was that directly addressed at the Singapore summit with President Trump and Chairman Kim?
It was.
And it was brought up, the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Why was it not in the communique following the Singapore
Yeah,
summit?
I'd rather not talk about the course of the negotiations and how we arrived at the language that we did.
Okay. Is North Korea still moving or making advancements, undertaking a nuclear program?
May I answer that question in a different setting?
You can't answer that question here?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to.
We'd love to provide that setting for you soon.
Happy to do it if we need to. I'm happy to do that. Here, Senator, here, I'm not trying to be cute. We're engaged in a complex negotiation with a difficult adversary, and each of the activities that we undertake is not going to be fully apparent to the world at the moment it is undertaken. And there will be processes and discussions that will be had that are important that they not be real-time disclosed. And as I answer one question and then choose not to answer another, it becomes patently obvious why I chose not to answer one or the other. And therefore, it seems to me that a blanket prohibition on heading down that path is the only way to ensure that I have the opportunity to negotiate this thing in a way that isn't being done in the Washington Post and the New York
I
Times.
understand. I think it's a very important point of information that we get, though, to know whether or not North Korea is either overtly, covertly, however they are doing it, making advancements in the nuclear program, or still continuing a measure of the nuclear program. I think it's very important for us.
So I did answer one question that I think it was from Senator Markey about whether they're continuing to create fissile material, and answered that indeed that they are.
The goal originally, I think, was a complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization by the end of the president's first term. Is that correct?
Yes,
Does that remain the goal?
yes, more quickly if possible.
When will we know if North Korea is moving toward denuclearization, concrete, verifiable steps?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I couldn't tell you what day. And by the way, I'm guessing this group would disagree about when that moment took place. That is a process for sure. And some will find the first step along the way demonstration of, I think you said, substantial progress. Others may want to wait until we're almost done to declare substantial progress. So I can't answer that. It's definitely a process and will definitely take time.
We've had a lot of discussions in this committee on strategic patience. The statement you uses patient diplomacy. Is the U.S. doctrine toward North Korea still one of maximum pressure?
It is. I'll tell you, the difference is a little bit subtle, and perhaps I don't want to overstate the difference in the language. Here's what's different. Strategic patience was, in our judgment, standing around hoping that something worked right. Here we have a strategic objective backed up with diplomatic and economic pressure, which we believe gives us a pathway to achieve the objective, and also an off-ramp in the event that we conclude that it doesn't work, to head another direction to achieve the denuclearization of North Korea.
Maximum pressure utilizes Section 102 of the North Korea Sanctions Policy Enhancement Act, which requires the president to initiate investigations into possible designations, of persons upon evidence that they're violating, proliferating activities, et cetera, so that we can apply additional sections. How many investigations into nukes are taking place right now?
I don't know how many, Senator, but I may try and answer your question in another way and see if this meets the bill. It is the case that this administration is continuing to work on enforcement actions for existing sanctions, for the existing sanctions regime. That is, we're not going to let it wander off. We're not going to let it weaken. You can't rename a ship and get out from underneath the sanctions regime. There are active enforcement work being done at the State Department and at the Department of Treasury related to North Korea.
So it's your view that there are additional North Korean or Chinese entities that could be identified under for additional sanctions. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
And those designations are not being upheld or laid off. They will continue.
We're going to use them in a way that we think increases the likelihood that Chairman Kim fulfills the commitment that he made to President Trump.
And what happens as it relates to additional activities with North Korea?
So I think the requests that South Korea has made are public.